see. Posting. It's live. Okay, let me share it real quick. Post and post. Tweet. All right, everybody. My name is Brian Kwong, and I'm the creator of Add1Challenge, and we have Luca here today.
Hello.
Answering some. Hey, Luca. So Luca is going to answer some of the questions for people who are in the Add1Challenge doing a language challenge for 3 months. So thank you so much for being here with us, Luca.
Thank you, Brian, for inviting me.
Always my pleasure. So we have 30 minutes, so we're just gonna go right in. So who wants to ask a question first? Fernando?
Ladies first, please.
Lena? She's
like, no, I don't want to start.
No. No, she muted herself because, you know.
Okay. So, Luca, it's not the first time I'm learning a language by myself, and again, I went to the same point. I got lost in the learning process. I don't know what to learn. I would like to know, how do you divide different levels between the different kinds of words? For example, how do you separate words from basic words to learn, intermediate level words to learn, and at last advanced words? Yeah. So how do you manage this process when you are learning a language alone, only with your own books and this stuff?
I have to say that I don't divide words into categories like belonging to the first phase or the second phase or the third phase. I just see words as, you know, part of a whole thing. So I don't think about, hey, I have to learn this set of words just because I'm a beginner. So what I do is just, well, I use my technique when I start. What I do is I clearly divide the learning process. I believe that in language learning in general, like a psychological process, and every other psychological process is made of mainly 3 phases. When you're a beginner, and I'm not just talking about from a linguistical point of view, but also from a psychological point of view. When you, for example, you said, you know, already the mere fact that you're dividing words and you're saying, well, I'm a beginner, so I have to learn these words because I'm a beginner. But I don't think you should think in this way. You should think a little bit differently. You should think that, think about your own, what is your native language?
Portuguese.
Portuguese, okay. So do you think that you learned words by thinking, you know, when you were a kid, by thinking, oh, this is like, these are words that belong to the beginner phase or like the intermediate phase? You didn't think?
No.
No, you didn't. So what you should do, and I think it's very effective, I think most people make the mistake of thinking that they have to try to nail the process of language learning in a way. But language learning is a complex process, but it becomes easy if you see it in a certain way. So let me explain it more in detail. When you start learning a language, one thing that you could do, for example, is apart from obviously using I use Asimil. I always use Asimil. This is my favorite book. It doesn't matter what book you use. What you should do is try to think about the things that you really like, for example, talking about. Let's suppose that you are learning, say, French, and you start using Asimil, but instead, and you want to talk to people on Skype, okay? You just decide, okay, well, I'm using Asimil, but I also want to start speaking immediately because that's good for you. Then you don't have to think about the words that you want to learn. You just talk about something you like talking about, and words will come to you. It's not about deliberate learning. It's more like indirect learning when you're trying to, when you talk about something you like. You really want to say that, and you really want to get your point across to the other person. Let's suppose that in your personal life, that's the reason why you cannot standardize, you cannot think, these words are important in X language. There are words that are important for you more than others, and some words will always be weird for other people because you might like a field that nobody else likes. So instead of thinking about the words that you have to categorize words, think about what you really like. And this is not only for speaking, but it's also for reading. Now we have the internet. So differently from before, what you can do is to find texts and make them understandable to you, texts that are about what you like. So for example, if you're learning French, I don't know, what language are you trying to learn right now?
I'm learning Spanish, French, and Italian.
Okay, so you're learning Spanish, French. Good choice. Well, I like old Latin, but for you it shouldn't be that difficult. Think about tomorrow, you wake up in the morning and you tell yourself, what are 5 topics I really want to talk about and I really want to read about, okay, and you really want to listen to. So 5 topics, then you do a research, because doing some research on YouTube saves you a lot on YouTube and whatever, saves you a lot of time. And then you focus on these 5 things you really want to talk about, listen to, and read. And that's the starting point. Then words will come automatically, because the fact that you want to understand something, or when reading, or the fact that you want to talk to somebody about something you really like, will have these words stick into your long-term memory, because like passion and interest drive language learning.
Cool. Is that clear for you?
Yeah, but only one thing. So it's okay if for example, I love nature, I love animals. So I've learned all these words about nature and animals in those 3 languages, but I can't talk about politics. Can I be considered a fluent in those languages?
But okay, so this is something that a lot of people talk about. For example, being C2 or being fluent. Fluent is when you're able to hold a conversation on many topics. But if you talk to a lot of native Italian people in villages, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're able to talk about politics. Does that make them not fluent? No. There are a lot of people who cannot. It's not so much about being something specific. Fluent is the capacity that your brain has given based on a set of things that or a set of words. Being fluent is being able to understand what people talk about, and being able to respond. Even if you don't know about something about topic, you can still say something in general. You're maybe it's a little bit. The fact that you don't know you cannot talk about politics doesn't mean a thing. Some other people don't know. They talk about, let's talk about animals. Well, I can talk about animals, but if we talk about something more specific in Italian, I may not be able to, to talk about it. It's not a matter of words. Fluent doesn't have. It's not knowledge. Fluent is an ability. It's a different thing. So fluent is the ability to tackle topics, but even if you don't tackle topics, somebody asks you about politics in Japanese, in Japanese or in Portuguese, if you don't know it, you cannot reply. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If you don't know the topic at hand, you have to. It's fluent is an ability. Remember, it's like don't make you confused about people who talk about you don't know that word, a given word, you're not fluent. Okay.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Luca. Thanks
You're welcome.
Great, awesome. So next question. Let's get a question from there's a question from Tara. Okay, her question is, how do you know when you got a solid language core or not? When you can start talking a little bit about like what is language core, how you can just do a little. I know you can talk a long time for this, like hours. Probably.
I was thinking about what to say exactly. It's
how would you know that you got a good language core?
As I said before, I know it when something clicks in my brain and I'm able to understand most of what people say, for example, and I'm able to express myself. The fact that sometimes we lack words doesn't mean a thing. But if you, for example, can even turn around some expressions because you don't know how to use, you don't know exactly those words, but you're still, able to hold a speech by using other things. People when people talk in general, what happens is that most often we are not able to gauge exactly how they talk, and the main reason is that we don't know what kind of processes are happening in the brain. Because if they might appear fluent because they're choosing other ways. You're really fluent when you have more options, when you can opt for this or that or that. But that, and I'm talking about native fluency or advanced fluency. But fluent, or when the core is set, you have a set of not only words, but you're able actually to use those words. It's a little bit different than having just a set of words and not being able to talk. So first, you got a core when you understand people. So your brain has developed the capacity of understanding connected speech, which is not easy. It's a very complex thing. Secondly, you can talk about any topic by simplifying things, by using other paths in your brain, not necessarily the most incredible words. And third, when you have some experience with the language and with the people, because people make the language, It's not just words. It's people and feelings. When, I don't know, you go out with a girl or you have your friends, whatever.
Yeah.
But that does count. You know, that does count because it leaves you things inside that make a huge difference. And that's the language core is not just a linguistical thing. It's not just about the amount of words that you know, but it's also about understanding connected speech and having some direct experience with a language. Not necessarily live, you know, in real life, that'd be great. But sometimes people living in Australia don't have the chance of, I don't know, meeting up with people, like in a village. But still, it's like direct contact with people, and that makes a huge, huge, huge difference.
Interesting. What comes to my mind is that listening to the questions and looking at the question, I think people are just maybe concentrating on the wrong thing. These things don't even have to worry about these kind of things. Basically, you just kind of you just study and learn what you want to learn, and eventually you just kind of click and it's there.
You know,
What do you have to worry about?
you know what? When people talk about studying, I don't, and for example, think that I've seen a lot of polyglots on YouTube, for example, showing their book collection. They got a lot of books. I have to say, I have very few books. I mean, language books. I love books in general. I love literature. I cannot show you here, but there's a ton of books just there. But they're not language books. They're life. They're like, I don't know, all the topics I really like, or normal literature. So
Yeah.
studying, I study a little bit, but I learn more than study, because studying is that when you sit down and you imagine myself, you know, like this, writing and reading and stuff. But the reality is that I don't study them much. I you know, move on to immediately to the second phase, which I call it learning, you know, where I learn in things much faster than other people who deliberately focus on learning lists of words and stuff. You can do that by choosing. I do it indirectly. You use something that you like, and you start reading it, and your desire of understanding that is going to help your brain memorize things automatically, not deliberately. It's a different process.
What's the difference between learning and studying?
Now, the difference between learning and studying is that when you study, you try to, for example, you tell yourself, well, I have to buy 300 books, or not necessarily 300 books. You can buy 3 books, 4 books, and you spend a huge amount of time on those books. Now, there are people who like grammar. There are people who love language books, and it's perfectly understandable. I don't dislike them, but I try to use them as little as I can, because I think that is just a starting point. And then I learn the language. This doesn't mean that I don't study, or that I don't study grammar. But for example, grammar rules are much easier to understand when you have already a grasp of the language, enough exposure. So by exposing yourself to things you like, and not by exposing yourself to, say, just language books where they impose the content, internet has changed everything. If people know how to learn how to use the internet, bingo, they won. You know, they won the war and the battle. This is one of the most important points ever. The internet has changed everything. So instead of focusing on, okay, you might buy a book or a couple of books. There are great language series there. I'm not you know, saying in any way that they're not good, but I'm just saying, as soon as you can, try to get into material which is, you know, the real material that you can find, like listening to interviews and stuff, but of things you like. For example, Wikipedia now offers, you go to Wikipedia, you can download the PDF, which is something, you know, it's no little feat, because I like, for example, PDF. I like seeing the PDF visually. You have to find things you like visually. I love PDFs, for example. Well, I print them because I don't like watching a computer too much. And then I find things on Wikipedia. You can type anything. You know, think about, do a brainstorming in the morning. You say, hey, I want to learn this language. How do I learn it? Oh, let me think about something I can download. Oh, Wikipedia. What am I passionate about? Sharks. I don't know. I like sharks, for example. I love sharks.
Really?
And yeah, I love, you know, dangerous animals in general. I'm passionate about danger. This is an aspect that I don't talk about these things, because I don't talk about personal things on YouTube. I mainly talk about language learning. But I like, for example, look, let me show you this. For example, you can see this. I don't know if you can see it.
Is that a spider?
Yeah. For example, I love spiders, and you know, and this is a beautiful book. So this is in French. So she's like, oh my God. I know. I like spiders. So by reading things that I really like, I learn a lot of things, and you know, and hours feel like minutes because you're doing something you
Yes.
really like. That makes a huge difference. But now that is a book, you know. But the things that you can find on the internet and you can download it, you can print, are incredible. So we have this beautiful ocean in front of us, but we have to take advantage of it because the internet has one good thing and one bad thing. First, it's too big. So being that big, if you don't focus on something, you risk of, you know, so you spend the whole day trying to download
Finding
that, trying to
stuff.
download
Yes.
that. Oh, wow, I like this. Oh, but I like that as well. So I'm going to download that as well. And then you finish. At the end, you don't do any. You do nothing. You know, because
Yes.
you don't focus on one thing. So my advice is 5 topics. 1, 2, 3, 5. That's it. You tell yourself, I like these 5 things. Then you go to the internet, you select a limited number of things that you want to read,
Mm.
listen to, and possibly talk about in a Skype conversation. You work on that, and then you move on to other things. Okay? Because it's a very, you know, structured way of dealing with things. It's not overwhelming.
So you do that and ISML.
Yeah. Well, basically, I do ASML, but then I immediately, you know, change my strategy. The fact is that I think most people have misunderstood when I said that my way of learning language is just translating back and forth. That is just a tiny part of the process, and it's at the beginning of the process. But then my strategy is more complex and consists of many phases, and the good thing is that it evolves with time. It adapts to the condition and to the knowledge and to the experience I have, because you have to change. Imagine if I were, you know, at this stage of French, for example, I was still translating books back and forth. I would go crazy, you know?
Yeah.
That would be a hell.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay. So next question. Mikhail or
I
Ajit
think
or Elena? You gotta unmute yourself first, Elena. Ajit, come on. We don't have time. We don't have much time. Come on.
Okay. I can't believe that you still cannot pronounce my name correctly, Ryan.
Sorry.
After all this time together.
Sorry. Ask your question.
Okay. Well, Luca, I was wondering about, well, you were talking about vocabulary and grammar, and I'm wondering about reviewing, like where and like how do you feel about reviewing? How do you do that? When do you think you should be, you know, doing that, or when do you think you should not?
Okay. Oh, this is another big question. I'm writing something down, otherwise I'll get lost. Okay. So let me show you. I'm not sure that you can see this. I think you've seen this before. Okay. Let me show you this just to make it clear visually. Do you see this?
Yes.
Do you see
Yes.
now? Normally, when you learn something, whatever you learn, you tend to forget it very quickly, unless it's in a very specific situation. Maybe in a bar, somebody said something strange, you know, and it caught your attention. But I think that, and this doesn't go just for language learning; it's in general. When we tend to think, oh, maybe we delude ourselves into thinking that if we read and listen to something, we're gonna, you know, it's gonna stick to our brain. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You have to review it in some way. But now the thing is that if you repeat it, reviewing and repeating is a little bit different. You have to make a distinction between repeating stuff. Well, let's suppose that you have learned, I don't know, an ASML dialogue or whatever, a text, and you want to you read and listen to it, okay, for the first time. Then when should you review it? Well, what I advise is that you don't. First, you have to try to do something every day, but not necessarily on that text. So let's consider that text as our point of reference, okay?
Yeah.
What I suggested, instead of trying to read and listen to it every single day in a repetitive way, what you try to do is try to, let me show you here, for example, every 2 or 3 days, just do 3 things on it. The first one, you read and listen to it. The second one is when you have a text, for example, and the audio, you can review it, but in a different way than you did 2 days before. For example, you just read it, or you just listen to it, by reading it in another language. For example, you have a bilingual text. You can, let's suppose you're learning French. You can listen to it in French, and you can read it in your own native tongue. But you can do so many things on that text. What I do is I consider just one unit. Well, I don't know. It's like an decimal lesson, for example,
Yeah.
and I break it down into maybe 2 or 3 parts. I listen to it. For example, I listen and read. Remember, listen and read at the beginning, both of them. You know, always listen and read, and then maybe 2 or 3 days later, you review it, but in a different way. Do whatever you want to do on it, but do it differently. Don't just do it again what you did 2 days ago. And the third day, or like the other step, which might be in 2 days later, do something different. What I do is like I translate back and forth. So I make sure that I consider every lesson, you know, every single dialogue. I attack it from different angles, but I don't try to read and listen to it every day. And by doing that, attacking it, like circling it like a castle, I retain the information, because you're telling your own brain that information is important. And I learn it indirectly. I have never learned one word by heart. Never, ever. Never tried to learn a word by heart. You just do things indirectly, and you get the results. It's so much more effective. Now, you don't have to translate like I do, because a lot of people don't like it. Other people like it, I don't know. But in general, you have to try to make it interesting. Whatever the text is, either maybe you chose it, or I don't know, you found it on the internet, or you just stumble upon it because you're using ASML, so they impose the content to you. What you have to do is try to make it interesting to your brain. That's what makes a difference. Because if it's not interesting, you can try to read it 300 times. It's not going to stick. No matter what you use. It's like you dilute it. There's an article which is in Italian. It's an amazing article. It explains all these things in such a clear way that when I saw it, I was, wow. You know, you have to look for Ebbinghaus. Ebbinghaus is a famous psychologist. Ebbinghaus. And
But do you have the name?
Can you?
Yeah, I can write it here.
Write
Okay.
it?
If you write this, and then you have this.
Ebbinghaus. Forgetting curve.
It's called Curva dell'Oblio. In Italian, well, it's kind of strange because the text in Italian is fantastic, but in the other versions, they don't even, I don't know, it's not complete. But the one in Italian is like, wow, because it explains in detail what this process is about. And when I saw it, I finally understood what I was doing, because what I was doing was effective to me, but then I found out why it's so effective from a scientific point of view. And I said, oh, that's cool. You know, I was like, this makes sense to me, and it made sense. So if I suggest you take a look at that, because by that you can infer the information, oh, now let me think about how I can organize things. Language learning is a personal thing, so the things I do are not necessarily good for you, but you can try to abide by this principle, and you're going to win, as I always say.
Awesome. Okay. So, okay, another question from, I can't pronounce his name, is that you guys can help me out here, maybe.
Mariusz.
Okay. So his question is, what if you have any goals when you're learning a language? What specific goals do you set for yourself if you do have it? How do you measure if you accomplish them or not?
So how do I measure my accomplishments?
Yeah. I mean, when you say you want to learn Japanese, do you have goals? If you have goals, how do you measure them?
I have to tell you the truth. I don't, you know, when you start learning a language, you're just like in front of a mountain. So I don't focus on the mountain too much. What you have to do is like, don't look at the peak of the mountain. Look at 5 meters ahead of you and think, I have 5 steps to do. Then, you know, this is like, it's concrete. It's like, if you think about I want to be super fluent in Japanese, no? For example, let's suppose that I'm talking about the language I am learning myself, and I still see the peak of the mountains up there. Like there is snow, it's beautiful, but it's still far. So I don't focus on that much because it's discouraging if you think, oh, okay, obviously my goal is to become fluent. It's always been like that. Yes. My final goal is always to embrace the language, embrace the people, because for me people are important. Embrace the culture as well. But I always have that clear, you know, that's a background. That's my background. You see, the beautiful mountain and the sky. That's my background.
Beautiful.
But my goal is like, to see 5 meters ahead. I'm seeing 5 meters ahead and just walking to reach those 5 meters. And when I've done that, for example, having a conversation with somebody and being able to get your point across, that's already great. So I'm just focusing one step at a time, of course, I have clear objectives. And the thing is that my final goal is the peak of the mountain. And I have 3 phases. So I consider, like, at the beginning, it's slow because the peak of, the mountain is steep. It's just a steep slope. So I try to go slowly. Then when it becomes easier in the intermediate phase, I'm just starting to see the peak. And once you are on the peak of the mountain, it goes down. And that's when you have built the language core. Once you have, which doesn't mean that you know all the words or whatever, but you start understanding what people talk about and you start enjoying the language, everything gets easier because you spend time watching a movie or just going out with your friends, and you learn it so fast you don't even realize it. People focus too much on thinking, I'm learning a language, and they think about it too much. Instead, you have to think, I know it sounds trivial, but that's exactly what it is. My secret, if you want to put it this way, is that I enjoy every single process. I have the whole path in front of me. I know what awaits me. I know it exactly, and I just know that I have to keep walking. And but something that really helps me in motivating myself is thinking about, for example, I don't know, I was in Paris last time. No, actually, I am in Paris.
You're in Paris,
yeah. Yes, I'm. But I met a Japanese couple. We started talking on the street, and the fact that I was talking to them, and it was cool. It was motivating, and I think, imagine going to Japan. Imagine knowing all these things. You always have to think about. For 3 months, and I said it in another video, it's like using this word glory, in the sense that it's like living multiple lives. Life is short, life is short. Totally. But if you can live 12 lives, hey, you're living more intensively than the others. And they think, oh, well, it's useless to know 12 languages. It's not true at all. It makes your life so much cooler, in every single possible aspect.
I believe you.
Me too.
Me too.
All right, so I think that's all the time we got today. Thank you so much, Luca.
Thank you. Thanks all of you for the questions.
And
Thanks,
I look.
You're welcome.
Great.
Thanks,
so I
Luca.
look forward to talking to you soon again.
Okay.
Thank you for everybody who's watching.
Bye.
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 Okay.